The millionaire paid millions for a mysterious bride. They said she was a virgin, but she never showed her face. At the auction, when the veil fell before the crowd, he froze. It was the last person he expected to see. If you like these soul stories, don't forget to leave a like. This helps me to continue bringing more. Under the golden sky of Rio de Janeiro's sunset, Breno Allen's helicopter flew over the bay, leaving behind the hustle and bustle of Rio de Janeiro's financial center. At 38, Breno had built a real estate empire that stretched across the country, transforming him into one of the most influential and sought-after men in Brazil. His imposing figure, 185 tall, with impeccably cut black hair and a smile that had already graced dozens of magazine covers, was synonymous with success and opulence. From above, he observed his most recent acquisition, the imposing palace, Aurora, a historic mansion in the exclusive São Conrado region, which would be the stage for the most talked-about event in recent times. As the helicopter landed on the private helipad, Breno adjusted the platinum watch on his wrist, a gift from an Arab sheikh after a billion-dollar deal. "Mr. Allen's preparations are underway as requested," informed Mateus, his personal assistant. For over a decade, as soon as Breno stepped onto the Italian marble that covered the helipad. "Excellent. I want a meeting with the marketing team in 30 minutes, Breno replied, adjusting his custom-made Armani suit. "This event needs to be perfect, Mateus, nothing less." Inside the mansion, a team of 50 people worked tirelessly to transform the place into the perfect setting for what Breno called the big night. Crystal chandeliers were cleaned, Persian rugs were laid out on the marble floors, and arrangements of rare orchids were strategically placed to create an atmosphere of unparalleled luxury. In his private office, overlooking Christ the Redeemer, Breno analyzed the final details of the event that promised to shake up Brazilian high society. An exclusive auction where he would present a mystery bride, a woman who, according to rumors spread deliberately by his team, would be the perfect candidate to share his life and fortune. "The site has already received over 1 million hits, sir," said Clarice, marketing director for the Allens Group. "Social media is abuzz and requests for invitations have tripled in the last 24 hours. Breno smiled, satisfied. "And what about the candidates?" 273 applicants have applied so far. All were subject to pre-selection, according to the established criteria. The team of psychologists is finalizing the interviews with the finalists. Perfect. Breno swiveled in his chair, contemplating the sunset that was painting the Rio skyline red. "It's going to be a spectacle worthy of a soap opera, isn't it, Clarice?" But behind his confident smile and his eyes shining with ambition, Breno carried a void that no million-dollar acquisition could fill. The nights in his duplex penthouse in Vieira Soto were lonely, despite the frequent company of models and socialites. Something was missing, a genuine connection that money couldn't buy. The idea for the auction had come to him during a trip to Dubai, where he had witnessed a similar event organized by a local tycoon. At first it had seemed like just another eccentricity to boost his public image, but as the project took shape, Breno began to glimpse the possibility of finding someone who could truly understand him beyond the facade of a powerful man. "Sir, your sister is on the line," Matthew announced, interrupting his thoughts. Breno frowned. "I don't have a sister, Matthew, you know that." "Excuse me, sir. It's Mrs. Patricia, your stepmother." He sighed deeply. "Tell me I'll come back later." The relationship with his father's second wife had always been troubled, especially after his death 5 years earlier. Patricia, only 12 years older than Breno, had inherited a considerable part of the Allens' initial fortune, which had always been a source of resentment for the businessman. The mention of the word sister awakened memories that Breno had struggled to keep buried. Vague flashes of a girl with braids, childish laughter echoing in a simple house in Niterói, long before the empire, long before fame, images that belonged to another life, to another Breno. In the main conference room, the team awaited their final instructions. On a giant screen, the faces of the 20 finalists selected for the auction were displayed in high definition, along with brief biographies. Beautiful, educated women from diverse backgrounds, all attracted by the prospect of a life of luxury with one of the most eligible bachelors in the country. "I want you to understand this," Breno began, walking slowly around the room as everyone watched him closely. "This is not just a media event. It is an opportunity for us to redefine the concept of relationships in the modern age. We are creating a spectacle, yes, but also a real chance for connection." Amanda, the events director, raised her hand. "Mr. Allens, the international press is questioning the, shall we say, controversial nature of the event. Some feminists are organizing protests for the day of the auction." Breno smiled, unfazed. "Great. There's no such thing as bad publicity, Amanda. Each protest is another spotlight on us. Besides, all the participants are here of their own free will, and the money raised will be donated in full to causes that support women in vulnerable situations. Turn criticism into opportunities." After the meeting, alone in his presidential suite on the top floor of the mansion, Breno watched the illuminated Rio while sipping a rare whiskey. In 3 days, the Palace Aurora would host an event that promised to go down in the history of Brazilian high society. The world's cameras would be focused on him, his creation, his spectacle. But as he stared at his reflection in the window, juxtaposed against the city lights, a nagging uneasiness haunted him. Something in the back of his mind whispered that this event would be different from any other he had ever hosted, not just because of the spotlight or the buzz on social media, but for a reason he could not yet fully understand. In his closet, inside a locked cedar box, there was a single photograph yellowed by time. A boy of about 8 years old hugging a little girl of about 4. Behind the photo, a single handwritten word, "Always." It was all that was left of a past that Breno Allens, the real estate magnate, pretended did not exist. A past that, without him being able to imagine, was about to resurface in the most unexpected way possible. In Barra da Tijuca, 20 minutes from Palace Aurora, Luisa Noronha was finishing another therapy session in her cozy office. The decor in shades of blue and green conveyed the serenity that her patients were looking for, a contrast to the tumult of her own emotions that day. "See you next week, Donna Carmen," smiled Luisa, accompanying her last patient of the day to the door. "Keep practicing those breathing exercises we talked about." By the age of 34, Luisa had built a solid reputation as a therapist specializing in family trauma. Her practice, located in a modern office building overlooking the ocean, was frequented by people from all walks of life, thanks to her social service program that reserved 2 days a week for low-income patients. When the door closed, Luisa allowed her professional smile to fade. Exhausted, she sank into her favorite chair, the one where her patients usually sat. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small newspaper clipping, already crumpled from being handled so much. The headline read in bold letters, "Real Estate. Magnate Breno Allens to hold auction to find ideal wife." "Are you really considering this?" The voice of Renata, his assistant and longtime friend, interrupted his thoughts. She entered the room, carrying 2 cups of chamomile tea. Luisa carefully folded the clipping before answering. "I need to see it, Renata, after all these years." "But an auction? Please, Lou, that's so degrading." Renata handed Luisa a cup and sat down in the chair opposite. "There are more conventional ways to reunite with a sibling." "Conventional?" Luisa let out a humorless laugh. "I've tried them all. He never answered my letters, never answered my calls. The Allens empire has high walls, Renata." Luisa's office, despite its success, was far from the luxury displayed by Breno. The walls displayed diplomas from UFRJ and certificates of specializations, achievements obtained with great effort by a girl who had grown up in an orphanage in Niterói, a girl who would never forget the face of her older brother being taken away by an elegant couple while she was left behind. "Well, at least you have the qualifications to pass the selection," Renata commented, trying to lighten the mood. "PhD in psychology, fluent in 3 languages, volunteer work. You are exactly the kind of woman a man like him would look for, if it weren't for the small detail that you share the same blood." Luisa watched the sunset through the wide window. "He doesn't know that. He probably doesn't even remember that I exist. And what do you plan to do? Show up at the auction, get selected and say, "Surprise, I'm your little sister"? That's crazy, Lou. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it, Louisa admitted, turning the cup between her hands. But I know this might be my only chance. It's been 26 years, Renata. 26 years since the Allens family decided to adopt just one of the Ribeiro brothers. In her apartment, a few hours later, Louisa opened her laptop and accessed the event's official website. The page displayed Breno's face in a sophisticated design, along with the requirements for candidates. A lengthy form had to be filled out, followed by a preliminary interview via video conference. With trembling fingers on the keyboard, Louisa began to fill out the form. Name, Luisa Noronha. She had abandoned the Ribeiro surname after being adopted by a middle-class family. Age, 34. Profession, clinical psychologist. A recent photo was mandatory, and Louisa selected one in which she appeared smiling discreetly, with shoulder-length brown hair and green eyes that she had inherited from her mother, the same eyes as Breno, although he now hid them behind blue contact lenses, as she had noticed in his media appearances. The past came flooding back as she filled out the questionnaire. She remembered her simple house in Niterói, her father a bus driver, her mother a seamstress, the accident that took both of them when Breno was 8 years old and she was only 4, the social worker's decision to separate them, because it would be easier to find a home for each of them individually, the despair on her brother's face when the Allens took him, promising that they would come back for her, a promise that was never kept. Louisa grew up in the foster care system until she was 7 years old, when she was adopted by the Noronha family, university professors who gave her an education and affection, but were never able to fill the void left by her lost brother. When she turned 18, she began her search, only to discover that Breno Ribeiro had become Breno Allens, heir to an empire and completely unapproachable. Now, as she finished the registration, a mixture of determination and apprehension took hold of Louisa. This eccentric auction, which in other circumstances would have seemed absurd to her, represented a unique opportunity to finally confront her brother, to understand why he had never sought her out, why he had allowed the blood ties to dissolve over time. Application submitted successfully. You will receive an email with the date and time of your preliminary interview, the message on the screen read. Louisa closed her laptop, emotionally exhausted. On her bedside table, a small wooden box held her most precious treasure, half of a medallion with the inscription Sem, a compliment to the half that Breno had, with the word Pre, a childhood pact that they would always be together, no matter what happened. The next morning, Louisa arrived at the office early to rearrange her schedule. If everything went according to plan, she would need free time for the auction selection process. Renata greeted her with a worried expression. "News from the front," he announced, handing Louisa a tablet with a page from a celebrity magazine open on it. "Apparently your brother is taking this auction business very seriously." The article detailed the selection process. After the initial screening of applications, candidates would undergo interviews with psychologists, background checks, and compatibility tests. The 20 finalists would participate in a preparatory retreat at the Palace Aurora itself, a week before the event, to develop genuine connections with the host. The article mentioned that more than 300 women had already applied, and the expectation was that this number would double by the end of the application period. "It's more complicated than I thought," Louisa muttered, handing back the tablet. "I don't know if I can get through all these steps without being discovered." "There's still time to give up this madness," Renata suggested. "You could simply hire a detective, or try again through the lawyers." "No," Louisa replied firmly. "I've already tried the conventional paths. This is my chance to be face-to-face with him, without intermediaries, without barriers." The doorbell at the office announced the arrival of the first patient of the day. Louisa took a deep breath, regaining her professional persona. As she had always done, she would channel her own pain to help others deal with their traumas. She was an exceptional therapist precisely because she understood, on a visceral level, the devastating impact of family separations. 3 days later, during her lunch break, Louisa received the long-awaited email. She had been selected for the interview phase. Her video conference session was scheduled for the following day at 2 p.m. That night, alone in her apartment, she rehearsed answers to possible questions, building a version of herself that could attract the attention of the selectors without revealing her true connection with Breno. Looking at herself in the mirror, she wondered if she was prepared for the consequences of this plan. What if he rejected her again? What if the public exposure resulting from this reunion would affect her career, her reputation? "It doesn't matter," he whispered to his reflection. "I need answers. I need to look him in the eye and ask him why he abandoned me." Her cell phone rang, interrupting her introspection. It was a notification of a new message. "Congratulations, Dr. Luisa Noronha. Your candidacy has aroused special interest in our client. Your interview tomorrow will be conducted personally by Mr. Allens." Luisa's heart was beating wildly as the private elevator went up to the top floor of the Allens building, an imposing skyscraper in Rio's business district. The change of plans had taken her by surprise. Instead of a video conference interview, she had been invited to meet Breno himself in person. The message she had received the night before had turned her anxiety into something almost palpable. "Take a deep breath," she murmured to herself, adjusting the navy blue dress she had carefully chosen, elegant but not ostentatious. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun, and her makeup was minimal, highlighting only the green eyes that she hoped would spark some memory in her lost brother. The elevator doors opened directly into a hall decorated with works of contemporary Brazilian art. A woman in an impeccable suit and a serious expression was waiting for her. "Dr. Noronha, I'm Amanda Peixoto, Events Director at Grupo Allens. Please come with me." Luisa followed Amanda through a wide hallway, the walls of which displayed photographs of luxurious developments built by the group. At the end of the hallway, a dark wooden double door marked the entrance to what appeared to be Breno's personal sanctuary. "Mr. Allens will be with you shortly," Amanda said, indicating a leather chair. "Would you like something to drink?" "Just water, thank you," Luisa replied, trying to control the tremor in her voice. When Amanda left, Luisa took the time to take a closer look at the office. It was a space that reflected power and sophistication, with a panoramic view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. On the walls, in addition to diplomas and certificates, there were several photographs of Breno alongside influential figures, politicians, celebrities, international businessmen. On one of the shelves, something caught his eye, a small cedar box, seemingly out of place among the contemporary decor. Before he could take a closer look, the side door opened. "Dr. Noronha, it's a pleasure to meet you." The deep voice made Luisa freeze. Slowly, she turned around and, for the first time in 26 years, faced her brother face to face. Breno Allens was even more imposing in person than in his photographs. Tall and athletic, he wore a tailored grey suit. His eyes, which Luisa knew were naturally green like hers, were hidden by blue contact lenses, a modification that perfectly symbolized the transformation of the boy Breno Ribeiro into the magnate Breno Allens. "The pleasure is mine." "Mr. Allens," Louise replied, holding out her hand and praying he wouldn't notice how it was shaking. Breno shook his hand briefly and indicated a seat near the window. "Please sit down. I must confess that your resume intrigued me. It's not common to find someone with your qualifications among the candidates." Luisa sat up straight, as she had learned during years of therapy to control her own anxiety. "I believe you are wondering why an established psychologist would be interested in this kind of event." Breno smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Precisely. You could find a partner through more conventional means, I imagine. Sometimes the unconventional paths lead us exactly where we need to be," Louise replied, holding his gaze. "Besides, your reputation precedes you, Mr. Allens. I confess, I've always been curious about the man behind the empire." For a moment, something seemed to waver in Breno's confident expression, a fleeting shadow of vulnerability that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. He stood up and walked to the window, his back to Luisa. Curiosity is a powerful impulse, Dr. Noronha, but it's also dangerous. Have you ever stopped to think that you might not like what you find? The question, loaded with meanings that Breno could not understand at that moment, hit Louisa like a punch. I believe that the truth, even if painful, is preferable to uncertainty. Breno turned, studying her intently. An interesting perspective for someone who works with fractured minds. In my experience, some truths are best left in the shadows. A heavy silence hung between them. Louisa fought the urge to reveal everything right then and there, to confront him with the truth about who she was. But she knew it wasn't the right time yet. "Tell me about your work," Breno asked, returning to his chair. "I read that you specialize in family trauma. Why?" Louisa chose her words carefully. "I believe that the deepest scars come from those who are supposed to protect us. When family, which should be our safe haven, becomes a source of pain, the impact is devastating and long-lasting." Something in the answer seemed to touch Breno. He leaned forward slightly. "And you? What scars do you carry, Dr. Noronha?" The direct question caught Louisa off guard. For a moment, she considered evading the question, but then decided to offer an edited version of the truth. "I lost my biological parents at a very young age. I was separated from my only sibling during the adoption process. I grew up with a loving family, but I always felt like a part of me was missing." Breno stiffened visibly. His fingers drummed on the table, a nervous gesture that contradicted his controlled posture. "I see. And your brother?" "I never saw him again," Louisa replied, keeping her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "He was adopted by a rich family. I tried to find him when I became an adult, but without success." Breno stood up abruptly. "Fascinating story. Dr. Noronha, now if I may be more direct, why would a woman like you, clearly intelligent and successful, consider the idea of being auctioned as a potential wife?" The abrupt change of subject was a deflection technique that Louisa recognized well from her sessions with defensive patients. "I don't see it as an auction, Mr. Allens. I see it as an opportunity for connection that transcends social conventions. Plus, I'm driven by curiosity, not just about you, but about myself and what I might discover in the process." An enigmatic smile curved Breno's lips. Curiosity. This topic again. He walked to a side table and poured himself a finger of whiskey. "You know, Dr. Noronha, of all the candidates I've interviewed so far, you're the first one who hasn't mentioned my fortune or the lifestyle I can offer." Louisa allowed herself a small smile. "Perhaps because I understand that wealth and happiness rarely go hand in hand, Mr. Allens. My wealthiest patients are often the most emotionally empty." Instead of taking offense, Breno laughed, a genuine sound that, for a moment, reminded Louisa of the laughter of the boy she had known as a child. "Touché, Doctor. Your frankness is refreshing." He glanced discreetly at his watch, a gesture that signaled the end of the meeting. "Well, I believe we have enough for today. I must say your candidacy is intriguing." Louisa stood up, feeling a mixture of relief and frustration at not having gotten more time with him. "I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Allens." As she was about to leave, Breno called her again. "Dr. Noronha, one last question. If you met your brother today, what would you say to him?" The question hit Louisa like a well-aimed arrow. She turned slowly, staring at Breno intensely. "I would ask him why he never looked for me. And then I would say that, despite everything, I never stopped loving him." Something indecipherable passed through Breno's eyes. For a second, Louisa thought she saw a flash of recognition, but it was so brief that it could have just been a product of her hope. "Interesting," he murmured. "Amanda will escort you out. We'll be in touch about next steps." In the elevator, descending the 50 floors of the building, Louisa finally allowed the tears to escape. The encounter had been emotionally exhausting, but also revealing. Breno hid his own pain under the facade of a powerful and unshakable man. In the lobby, her phone vibrated with a message. It was from Renata. "So, how was it?" Louisa took a deep breath before answering. He didn't recognize me, but I'll continue. Meanwhile, on the roof, Breno stood motionless in front of the window, the whiskey untouched in his hand. Something about Dr. Noronha had awakened memories he thought were buried. Flashes of a simple house in Niterói, the face of a little girl crying as he was led away. With determined steps, he walked over to the bookshelf and picked up the cedar box that Luisa had noticed. Inside, besides the yellowed photograph, there was half a medallion with the inscription Pre. His fingers caressed the object, a relic of a life that seemed to belong to someone else. "Mateus," he called over the intercom, "I want a full investigation. Into Luisa Noronha. Everything: birth, adoption, academic background. I want to know exactly who she is." A week after the interview, Luisa received the email she had been waiting for. She was among the 20 finalists selected for the retreat at the Palace Aurora. The message included detailed instructions on what to bring and a confidentiality agreement that she was asked to sign. The last line informed her that a driver would pick her up at her apartment the following morning. "You did it!" Renata exclaimed as she helped Luisa pack her bags. "But I still think this idea is completely crazy." "It's the only way I can get close enough to him so we can talk without intermediaries," Luisa replied, carefully folding a long dress. "Over the next 2 weeks, I'll have several opportunities to reveal the truth." Renata sat on the edge of the bed, watching her friend with concern. "What if he rejects you again? Are you prepared for that?" Luisa paused for a moment, holding the medallion with the inscription "Without" that she always carried. "I have to be. I've spent my entire life helping people face their deepest pain. It's time to face mine." The next morning, a black limousine pulled up in front of Luisa's apartment building at exactly 8 a.m. The driver, a middle-aged man with an impassive expression, put her luggage in the trunk and opened the back door. To Luisa's surprise, she was not alone in the vehicle. "Dr. Noronha, welcome," greeted Amanda Peixoto, the events director who had welcomed her into Breno's office. "We have one stop to make before we head to the palace." During the trip, Amanda explained that they would be picking up another finalist, Olivia Castro, a businesswoman in the sustainable fashion sector. The conversation was purely professional, with Amanda detailing the retreat schedule and the rules that would need to be followed. "Mr. Allens values discretion above all else," Amanda emphasized. "Any violation of the confidentiality agreement will result in immediate disqualification and possible legal action." After picking up Olivia, a tall, elegant woman with long black hair and a calculating smile, the limousine headed towards São Conrado. During the journey, Luisa observed the landscape of Rio de Janeiro, trying to contain the anxiety that was growing in her chest. She was about to spend 2 weeks living under the same roof as her brother, pretending to be a contender for his wife's position. The irony of the situation was not lost on her. The Orchid Palace turned out to be even more impressive than the magazine photos suggested. Set on 5 hectares of land, the neoclassical palace had been the residence of a 19th-century coffee baron and later a European ambassador. Breno had recently acquired it and had given the property a complete makeover, preserving the historic facade while completely modernizing the interior. Upon arriving, Luisa noticed that several other limousines were already parked in the circular courtyard in front of the mansion. An army of uniformed staff were receiving the guests, collecting their luggage and leading them into the palace. "This way, ladies," Amanda indicated, leading Louise and Olivia up a marble staircase that led to a grand foyer. "Mr. Allens will be hosting you for brunch in the conservatory in an hour. Your rooms are already prepared." The 20 finalists were accommodated in individual suites on the second floor of the palace. The room assigned to Luisa was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in shades of teal and gold, with a private balcony that offered views of the meticulously manicured gardens and the Atlantic Ocean beyond. As she unpacked her bags, Luisa tried to organize her thoughts. She had mentally rehearsed several approaches to revealing her identity to Breno, but none seemed right. How do you tell a man that you are the sister he left behind more than 2 decades ago? And worse still, how do you do it without looking Like a profiteer trying to claim a share of his fortune. A soft knock on the door interrupted his musings. It was a young woman in a white uniform, introducing herself as Julia, his personal assistant during his stay. If this story is touching, leave a heart in the comments. Dr. Norona, I came to check if everything is in order and to inform you that brunch will start in 30 minutes. Can I arrange anything for you before then? Everything is perfect, thank you, replied Louisa. Just one question. Has Mr. Allens arrived yet? The boss is meeting with his staff in the main office. He will join the ladies at 11 a.m. sharp. When Julia left, Louisa sat on the edge of the king-size bed, feeling small and out of place amidst so much luxury. She picked up her cell phone and saw messages from Renata wishing her good luck. After responding briefly, she opened her digital diary, a habit she had maintained since adolescence, recording thoughts and feelings as a way of processing them. Today begins the week that could change everything, he wrote. I'm meters away from him, but we've never felt so far apart. The boy who carried me on his shoulders, who told me stories at night, is now this man who barely looks me in the eye. I'm afraid of discovering that Breno Ribeiro no longer exists, that he's been completely replaced by Breno Allens. At 11 a.m. sharp, all the finalists were gathered in the palace's spectacular winter garden, a glass and metal structure that housed rare plant species from several continents. Round tables with 8 seats each had been arranged among palmy trees and exotic orchids, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and relaxed. Louisa discreetly observed the other competitors, beautiful, sophisticated women of different ethnicities and professional profiles. There were businesswomen, lawyers, doctors, artists, all clearly selected not only for their appearance, but for their achievements and distinct personalities. Ladies, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our host, Mr. Breno Allens. All heads turned to the entrance to the winter garden, where Breno appeared wearing a light suit that contrasted elegantly with his tanned skin. Beside him, Matthew, the personal assistant, carried a leather briefcase. Good morning, everyone, Breno greeted with a practiced smile. It's a pleasure to welcome you into my home for what I hope will be a transformative experience for all of us. His gaze swept the room, stopping briefly on each face until he found Louisa. For an instant, imperceptible to the others, something seemed to waver in her expression, a fleeting shadow that only Louisa, with her trained therapist's eye, was able to detect. Over the next 2 weeks, he continued, we will have the opportunity to get to know each other beyond appearances and social conventions. This is not just a process of choosing a partner, but a journey of self-discovery. As Breno spoke about the values he sought and the activities planned for the retreat, Louisa watched him closely, searching for traces of the brother she had known as a child. He was there, hidden beneath layers of sophistication and restraint, in the way he gestured when talking about something that excited him, in the way he tilted his head slightly when asked a question. After the opening speech, the participants were invited to briefly introduce themselves. When it was Louisa's turn, she felt Breno's intense gaze on her. I'm Louisa Noronha, a psychologist specializing in family trauma, she said, keeping her voice steady. I believe that our ability to overcome past wounds defines who we become. I'm here because I value genuine connections, something increasingly rare in our world of superficial relationships. Breno watched her with an expression that was impossible to decipher. When everyone had finished introducing themselves, he spoke again. I appreciate each of you for your sincerity. Starting tomorrow, we will begin our schedule with individual and group activities. Tonight we will have a formal dinner to celebrate the beginning of this journey. During the brunch that followed, Louisa was seated at a table far from Breno, who circulated between the groups, spending a few minutes chatting with each table. When he finally reached Louisa's table, the tension between them was almost palpable. Dr. Noronha, he greeted, sitting in the vacant chair next to her. I hope you are comfortable in your quarters. Perfectly, Mr. Allens. Your hospitality is impeccable. For a few moments they chatted about pleasantries, the weather, the beauty of the gardens, the history of the palace. Then, unexpectedly, Breno lowered his voice. You know, after our interview I was intrigued by your story. the separation from your brother. It must have been devastating." Louisa's heart raced. It was, but I think it was hard for him too. He was just a child after all. "And do you think he remembers you?" Breno asked, his eyes now fixed on hers. Louisa hesitated before answering. "I'd like to think so. Some connections are impossible to completely forget, no matter how much time passes." Breno opened his mouth to say something but was interrupted by Amanda, who approached discreetly. "Mr. Allens, Mr. Blacksmith is on the phone. He said it's urgent." With a nod, Breno stood up. "We'll continue this conversation soon, Dr. Norona. I have a feeling we have a lot to discover about each other." As she watched him walk away, Louisa felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. There was something in Breno's tone, in the intensity of his gaze, that suggested he was closer to the truth than she had imagined. The question now was he ready to face it? The first week of the retreat was a whirlwind of carefully planned activities designed to test the participants' social, intellectual, and emotional skills. There were debates on complex topics, physical challenges in the palace gardens, cooking, sessions with a renowned chef, and even a mock corporate crisis management exercise. Each day, Breno eliminated one candidate, reducing the initial group of 20 women to 13. Louisa survived each elimination, though she didn't know if it was due to her performance or the curiosity she had clearly aroused in Breno. He watched her constantly, even when he thought she wasn't noticing. On a few occasions, Louisa caught him studying her face with an expression of confused familiarity, like someone trying to remember a dream upon waking. On the evening of the seventh day, a masquerade ball was announced. "An opportunity," Amanda explained to the participants, "for interactions to transcend first impressions and allow for deeper connections." In her suite, Louisa contemplated the emerald dress she had found on her bed, a gift from Breno. To all the finalists, next to the dress was a Venetian mask adorned with crystals and feathers in the same shade. The ensemble was stunning and clearly tailor-made for her. "He's playing with me," she muttered to herself as she tried on the mask. In front of the mirror, the accessory covered the upper part of her face, leaving only her eyes visible, those green eyes that were identical to Breno's before the blue contact lenses. Julia, her personal assistant, knocked softly on the door. "Dr. Norona, I came to help. You get ready for the ball." With the young woman's help, Louisa transformed herself. The dress hugged her curves discreetly, the makeup enhanced her natural beauty, and her brown hair was arranged in soft waves that fell over one shoulder. With the mask on, she looked like a figure straight out of a modern fairy tale. "Mr. Allens asked me to deliver this too," said Julia, holding out a small velvet box. Inside, Louisa found a pair of emerald earrings surrounded by diamonds. A card accompanied the jewelry. "To match your eyes, ba." The message sent a shiver down Louisa's spine. Was it a veiled acknowledgement of their similarity, or was it simply a calculated gesture to impress her, as he had probably done with the other? Finalists? The ballroom of the Orchid Palace, usually impressive, had been transformed into a fantasy setting for the occasion. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in soft golden light. Arrangements of white and green flowers decorated every table, and column and a chamber orchestra played classical compositions in a quiet corner. The 13 finalists, each wearing a different colored dress and mask, created a spectacle of elegance and mystery. Breno, wearing an impeccable tuxedo and a simple black mask that covered only his eyes, waited in the center of the room. When Louisa entered, his gaze immediately met hers. For a moment, everything around them seemed to disappear. The other, women, the music, the special guests that Breno had included to make the event more dynamic. It was as if only the two of them existed in that immense hall. He walked toward her, ignoring the other finalists who tried to catch his eye. "Dr. Norona," he greeted, bringing her hand to his lips in an old-fashioned gesture that, coming from anyone else, would have seemed affected. "You look stunning tonight." "I appreciate the gifts, Mr. Allens," Louise replied, discreetly indicating the earrings. "That's quite generous of you." "Please, tonight, let's leave formalities. Aside, call me Breno. Only if you call me Louisa." He smiled, a smile that, for the first time since they had met again, seemed genuine. "Fair enough. May I have this dance, Louisa?" The orchestra began a soft waltz, and Breno led her to the center of the dance floor with a grace that surprised Louisa. Their bodies moved in perfect synchrony, as if they had danced together hundreds of times before. "You dance exceptionally well," he commented, as he guided her through the complex movements of the waltz. "My adoptive father insisted that I take classical dance lessons. He said that art connects us with the best of ourselves." Breno's eyes sparkled with interest behind the mask. "Tell me more about your adoptive family." As they danced, Louisa shared carefully selected fragments of her story, the kindness of the Noronas, their support when she decided to study psychology, the family traditions that helped heal some of her childhood wounds. She purposely omitted any direct mention of the orphanage in Niterói or the Ribeiro family name. "And your scars?" Breno asked suddenly. "The ones you mentioned during our interview, have they completely healed?" The unexpected question made Louisa briefly lose her step. Breno supported her firmly, their bodies getting even closer. "Some scars never heal completely," she replied, looking him straight in the eye. "We learn to live with them, to incorporate them into our story. But every now and then they hurt again." Something in the answer seemed to touch Breno deeply. His expression, even partially covered by the mask, revealed a vulnerability that contrasted drastically with the persona of a powerful and unshakable man he cultivated. "And what about you, Breno?" asked Louisa, seizing the moment of openness. "What scars do you carry under the armor of success and wealth?" The song ended, but they remained embraced for a few seconds longer than necessary. Finally, Breno pulled away slightly, and with a discreet gesture invited her to follow him off the dance floor. "Come with me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something I want to show you." Louisa followed him through the hall and down a side hallway until they reached a discreet door, protected by a security code that Breno quickly entered. The door led to a spiral staircase that ascended to what appeared to be an observation tower. "This was the private library of the Baron who built this palace," Breno explained as they climbed up. "When I restored the building, I turned it into my personal retreat." The space at the top of the stairs was surprisingly cozy. A circular room with walls lined with antique bookshelves, comfortable leather armchairs, and large windows that offered a panoramic view of the sunlit gardens and the ocean beyond. "Few people know about this place," Breno said, pouring 2 glasses of wine from a bottle that was already open on a side table. "It's where I come when I need to escape from everything." Louisa accepted the cup, observing the environment that revealed a side of Breno that the public would never imagine. The shelves contained classics of world literature, works of philosophy, psychology, and history. Nothing like what one would expect from the superficial playboy portrayed in celebrity magazines. "Answer my question, Breno," she insisted softly. "What are your scars?" He sighed deeply, walking to one of the windows. For several minutes he remained silent, as if fighting an internal battle over how much to reveal. Finally, without turning around, he began to speak. "I was born Breno Ribeiro, the son of a bus driver and a seamstress in Niterói. We had little money, but we were happy. I had a little sister, 4 years younger, who was the light of my life." Louisa's heart raced. It was the first time he had openly mentioned his true past. "When I was 8 years old," he continued, "there was an accident. My parents didn't survive, and we, 2 children with no close relatives, were taken to an orphanage." His voice shook slightly. "The Allens came looking for a child to adopt. They chose me. I promised my little sister that I would come back for her, that I would never abandon her." Breno finally turned around, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "But the Allens didn't want 2 children. When I begged them to adopt my sister too, they said it was good enough to take me in. Eventually, they forbade me to talk about my past, to mention my biological family. It was as if Breno Ribeiro had never existed." Louisa could barely breathe. Each word confirmed what she had always suspected, that Breno had not abandoned her by choice, that circumstances had separated them, against their will. "When I turned 18 and gained access to the trust fund my adoptive father had set up, the first thing I did was hire investigators to find her," Breno continued, approaching one of the bookshelves. But it was as if she had disappeared. The orphanage records indicated that she had been adopted by a family in the countryside, but that was where the trail ended. He removed a book from the shelf, revealing a small safe built into the wall. After turning the combination dial, he opened it and removed the cedar box that Louisa had seen in his office. "For years I kept only this," he said, opening the box. To reveal the yellowed photograph and half of the locket marked pre. "It's all I have left of her." Louisa could no longer contain her tears. With trembling hands, she removed the necklace she always carried from inside her dress, revealing the other half of the medallion. "That's not all that's left, Breno," he whispered, joining the two halves that fit perfectly together, forming the word always. "I'm here." The shock on Breno's face was indescribable, a mixture of disbelief, hope, and fear. "Louisa Ribeiro?" "Yes," she confirmed, removing her mask so he could see her face fully. "Your little sister." For several seconds, silence dominated the tower's library. Breno observed Louisa as if he were facing an apparition, his eyes alternating between her face and the two halves of the medallion now joined in his hands. The mask he was wearing fell to the floor, forgotten, completely revealing his features contorted in disbelief. "All this time," he finally murmured, his voice barely audible. "You were so close." A whirlwind of emotions flashed across his face. Relief, guilt, joy, confusion. He took a hesitant step toward Louisa, as if afraid she might disappear if he touched her. "Why?" he asked, his voice suddenly hardening. "Why play this game? Why not just come to me directly?" Louisa took a deep breath before answering. "I tried, Breno. For years I tried all the conventional avenues. I sent letters, emails, tried to schedule meetings. Your team blocked every attempt, claiming they were just strategies to extort money." Breno's expression revealed that this information was new to him. "I never received any of this," he said, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "They filtered everything, probably under orders from my adoptive father, even after he passed away." Louisa nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. "When I saw the auction announcement, I realized it would be my only chance to reach you without intermediaries, to be able to look you in the eye and asking why I never came back for you," he finished, the guilt evident in his voice. "Because I broke my promise." A sob escaped Louisa's lips, all the professional composure she had cultivated over the years crumbling before the intensity of the moment. "Yes, I spent my whole life wondering if you had forgotten me, if you had moved on without looking back." Breno covered his face with his hands, his broad back hunched as if supporting an invisible weight. When he looked back at her, his eyes were filled with tears. "I've never forgotten, Lulu," he said, using the childhood nickname no one else knew. "There wasn't a single day that went by that I didn't think about you, that I didn't feel guilty for living in luxury, while I didn't even know if you were okay." The use of the nickname broke Louisa's last emotional barrier. Tears now ran freely down her face, smudging her carefully applied makeup. "Do you still remember?" "I remember everything," he confirmed, stepping closer. "How you were afraid of thunder and would hide under my bed. How you insisted that I read the same story every night, the one about the girl who talked to animals. How you saved the last piece of chocolate from your birthday to share with me." Each shared memory was like a bridge being rebuilt between them, reconnecting them after decades of separation. Louisa felt the urge to hug him, to confirm that he was real, that her brother really was before her. But before she could move, Breno's expression changed, a shadow of distrust crossing his gaze. "If you are truly my sister," he said, taking a step back, "why did you sign up as a bidder at an auction to be my wife? What did you hope to gain? By doing so?" The question, loaded with suspicion, hit Louisa like a slap. "Win? I don't understand." "My fortune," Breno clarified, his voice taking on the cold, calculating tone of the ruthless businessman the world knew. "It's what everyone wants from me. Perhaps you've come up with this plan, this identity, to claim your fair share of the Allen's empire." Louisa recoiled, shocked by the accusation. "How can you think that? I'm an established professional, Breno. I don't need your money." A psychologist with an office in Baradati Hookah, he replied sarcastically. Forgive me if I am not impressed. By your material disinterest, I have faced con artists and opportunists throughout my public life. Hurt gave way to indignation. Louisa straightened her shoulders, regaining her dignity. I came here looking for my brother, not his money. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand why our paths parted like that. But I see that the boy I knew, the one who promised me that we would always be together, really doesn't exist anymore. She placed her half of the medallion on the table between them. Keep it. It doesn't mean anything anymore. As she turned to leave, Breno stopped her, gently grabbing her arm. Wait, please. His voice had lost all hostility, replaced by a genuine plea. I'm sorry, it's hard to believe. After so long, after so many fruitless searches, Louisa looked at him, waiting for him to continue. How can I be sure? He asked, almost pleading. After all these years, how can I know for... Sure it's you. The question, though painful, was understandable. Louisa thought for a moment before answering. You have a birthmark on the back of your right knee, shaped like a half moon. Mom said it was because you were blessed by the moonlight the night you were born. Breno's eyes widened. This was a detail no one but a close family member would know. And you, he said slowly, have a small scar above your left eyebrow from when you fell down the stairs trying to get to the cookie jar Dad hid on the top shelf. Louisa instinctively touched the almost imperceptible mark, covered by makeup. You picked me up and ran me to the health center, telling me the whole time that everything was going to be okay, that you were with me. The last trace of doubt disappeared from Breno's face. With a sudden movement, he pulled her into a tight hug, burying his face in her hair. My little sister, he whispered, his voice cracking. I finally found you. Louisa returned, the hug with the same intensity, allowing years of longing and pain to dissolve in that contact. For several minutes they remained like that, reuniting in silence, their tears mingling while the world outside, the auction, the other finalists, the guests, seemed irrelevant and distant. When they finally pulled away, Breno held Louisa's face between his hands, studying every detail as if he wanted to memorize it. You look so much like Mommy, he said, amazed. The same eyes, the same smile. And you're just like Daddy, she replied, smiling through her tears. Tall and determined, always looking like you could carry the world on your shoulders. Breno led her to one of the armchairs, sitting beside her without letting go of her hand, as if he feared she might disappear again. We have so much to recover, he said. So many lost years. And we have time now, Louise assured him, squeezing his hand. But first, we need to resolve the immediate situation. There are 12 women downstairs waiting for you, convinced that one of them will be chosen as your wife. The reality of the auction hit Breno like a cold shower. My God, the auction, this whole absurd spectacle I created. Why, Breno? Louisa asked gently. Why organize something like this? You, who could have any woman you wanted. He let out a deep sigh, standing up to pour more wine into the forgotten glasses. On the surface, it was a marketing strategy for the group's new ventures. But the truth is... He hesitated as if gathering his courage. The truth is, I was tired of the loneliness, the emptiness. I thought that creating this surreal event might somehow fill the hole I'd felt since I was a child. Louisa nodded, in understanding. As a therapist, she recognized the mechanisms of compensation, the desperate attempts to fill emotional voids with outward displays of power and wealth. What now? She asked. How are we going to deal with all this? Breno ran his hand over his face, thoughtful. I need to cancel the auction, obviously, but I can't just announce that I found my lost sister among the candidates. The media would turn it into an even bigger circus. I agree, said Louise, but we can't continue this charade either. It would be cruel to the other women and, frankly, disturbing to us. For a few minutes, they discussed possible solutions to the dilemma. Finally, Breno had an idea. What if we turned the auction into something else? Something that would still capture media attention, but with a more noble purpose. Luisa's eyes sparkled with interest. What kind of transformation? A fundraiser, Breno suggested, his voice growing more enthusiastic as he developed the concept. For vulnerable children, especially those separated from their families, we could use this entire platform to raise awareness about the problems in the foster care system to prevent other children from going through what we went through. Luisa smiled, thrilled by the proposal. It's a wonderful idea, but how would we explain the sudden change? Breno thought for a moment. I will say that during the process of meeting the finalists, I had an epiphany about the true purpose of wealth and influence. It's not a lie, after all. He squeezed Luisa's hand. Meeting you made me realize that there are things much more important than money or status. And what about my role? Asked Luisa. How will we justify my continued presence in your life? A genuine smile lit up Breno's face. You will be introduced as a special consultant for the Allens Group's new social project. Your experience with family trauma will be invaluable. Over time, when the dust settles, we can gradually reveal the truth or keep our story private, if we prefer. Luisa nodded, pleased with the plan. It was an elegant solution to a complex problem, allowing them both to save face while they began the long process of rebuilding their relationship. There's something else I need to confess, Breno said suddenly, his expression becoming serious again. Something you should know before we decide to go down this path together. Luisa waited, apprehensive. When your application arrived, there was something about you that deeply intrigued me. I couldn't understand why your face seemed so familiar, why I felt so connected to you, so I had you investigated. You what? Exclaimed Luisa, surprised. I asked for a full investigation into his past, Breno admitted, embarrassed. But curiously, the report I received didn't mention anything about the orphanage in Niterói or the Ribeiro surname. It was as if his story began only with his adoption by the Noronhas. Luisa frowned in confusion. How is that possible? My adoption records are public, yet not easily accessible. Exactly what I wondered, Breno agreed, until I discovered that my assistant, Mateus, had been falsifying reports for years under orders from my adoptive father that continued even after his passing. He was the keeper of the Allens family's secrets, tasked with keeping the past buried, including preventing any information about you from reaching me. The revelation shocked Luisa. So Matthew knew who I was from the beginning. Did he knowingly allow me to participate in the auction, knowing that we are brothers? Apparently, Breno confirmed, anger evident in his voice. When I confronted him yesterday, he confessed that he had been intercepting your attempts to contact him. For years. He said he was protecting the family's interests and the purity of the Allen name. That's disturbing, Luisa commented, processing the information. Where is he now? Fired, Breno replied firmly, with a confidentiality agreement so strict that he will never dare mention our name again. They remained silent for a few moments, each absorbing the implications of everything that had been revealed. Finally, Luisa asked, What now, Bay? What do we do from here? The use of his old childhood nickname made Breno smile. We start over, one day at a time. We make up for lost time. He took the two halves of the medallion and put them back together. Always together like we promised. At that moment, as the brothers reconnected in the palace tower, the guests at the masquerade ball continued to dance, oblivious to the profound transformation taking place above them. Transformation that would soon affect them all in ways no one could have foreseen. The event hall at the Copacabana Palace Hotel was ablaze with the light of hundreds of candles and arrangements of white orchids, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and welcoming. 6 months had passed since the night of the masked ball at the Palace Aurora, and the event that was now unfolding represented the culmination of an extraordinary journey of transformation. In the seats that would have been occupied by wealthy buyers vying for a mystery bride, there were now representatives of the country's largest philanthropic foundations, celebrities committed to social causes, and influential political figures. The cameras broadcasting the event live were focused not on an eccentric auction, but on the official inauguration of the Ribeiro Allens Foundation, an organization dedicated to transforming Brazil's adoption system and ensuring that siblings are never again separated during the process. Backstage, Luisa nervously adjusted the necklace that now featured the complete medallion, with the word "always" engraved on it, a gift from Breno to mark the beginning of this new chapter in their lives. "Everything is perfect," assured Renata, now the foundation's executive director, helping Luisa with the final details of her outfit. The speech is on the teleprompter, the orchestra is ready, and Breno is already on stage talking to the minister. Luisa took a deep breath, trying to calm the anxiety she felt. It wasn't just the event itself that made her nervous, but what it represented: the public revelation of her story, the officialization of her identity as Breno Allen's sister. In the months since their reunion, the brothers had decided to keep their relationship relatively private, allowing them to reconnect, out of the spotlight, while they carefully planned how to turn the potential scandal into something positive. The auction was officially cancelled the morning after the masquerade ball, with Breno announcing that he had found a greater purpose for his fortune and influence. The finalists received generous financial compensation, and surprisingly, many of them remained involved with the cause after learning the full story. Olivia Castro, the sustainable fashion entrepreneur, had become particularly involved, developing a line of products whose profits went entirely to the foundation. "5 minutes," announced a producer, peering through the dressing room door. Luisa nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Tonight, her story would no longer be private and would become a flag, a symbol of hope for thousands of children in situations similar to those she and Breno faced. On stage, under the bright lights, Breno adjusted his microphone, his confident posture masking the emotion he was feeling. Over the past 6 months, he had undergone a profound transformation, not only in his public life, redirecting much of his resources to social causes, but also in his personal life, reconciling with the boy from Niterói whom he had been forced to bury. His therapy sessions with Luisa, initially uncomfortable but increasingly revealing, had helped to heal wounds he hadn't even known were still raw. The discovery that his adoptive parents had deliberately obstructed any attempt to reunite with his sister had been particularly painful, but also liberating, allowing him to finally understand that the abandonment had not been his fault. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming through the room as the conversations died down, "I thank you all for coming on this very special evening. A little over 6 months ago, many of you were expecting to attend a very different event, one that I now admit was born from a place of emptiness and loneliness in my heart." The audience, made up of people who had followed Breno Allens's public transformation from eccentric playboy to dedicated philanthropist, listened intently. Fate, however, had other plans, and today I am here to share with you not only the birth of a foundation, but the rebirth of a family that was broken by the system we now aim to reform. Breno paused, his eyes meeting Luisa's, who was waiting in the wings. With a smile, he extended his hand towards her. "I would like to call to the stage the woman who made all of this possible, the clinical director of the Ribeiro Allens Foundation, my partner in this journey, and the person who taught me the true meaning of family, Dr. Luisa Ribeiro Allens." The use of their full names, a combination they had officially adopted together just a week ago, was new to both of them, but it felt right, like an acknowledgement of both their origins and the path they had taken separately. Luisa walked onto the stage with firm steps, the natural elegance she had always possessed now enhanced by a quiet confidence. Standing next to her brother, it seemed as if she had finally found her place in the world. "Thank you, Breno," she said into the microphone, her voice clear and emotional. "And thank you all for being here tonight, witnessing not only the launch of a social initiative, but the completion of a 26-year quest." A murmur of curiosity ran through the audience. Although rumors about the true nature of the relationship between Breno and Luisa had been circulating for months, this was the first public confirmation. "Breno and I were born Breno and Luisa Ribeiro, the children of a bus driver and a seamstress from Niterói," she continued, feeling her brother's hand squeeze hers in support. When we lost our parents, in an accident, at the age of 8 and 4 respectively, we were separated during the adoption process, a practice that is unfortunately still common in Brazil and in many countries around the world. While Luisa shared her story, her childhood in the orphanage, her adoption by the Noronha family, her failed attempts to find her brother, and finally her unexpected reunion during what was supposed to be a bride auction, the room remained in absolute silence, captured by the narrative that seemed to come straight out of a soap opera script, but was painfully real. Our story, though unique in its details, reflects the reality of thousands of Brazilian children, Luisa explained, her therapist's voice conveying both authority and compassion. Today, more than 40,000 children and adolescents live in shelters in Brazil, and approximately 20% of them have siblings from whom they were separated during the foster care or adoption process. Breno took back the microphone, completing Luisa's thought with the naturalness of someone who had spent his entire life by her side, instead of just a few months. The Ribeiro Allens Foundation was created with 3 main objectives, he announced. First, to create a unified national registry that will facilitate the location of siblings separated by the system. Second, to establish foster homes specially designed to keep groups of siblings together while they await adoption. And third, to implement psychological support programs for children and adolescents facing family separation under the specialized supervision of Dr. Luisa. As they detailed projects already underway, including the renovation of 5 shelters in Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, and the creation of facial recognition software to help reunite siblings, the audience responded with growing enthusiasm. Donation pledges were announced spontaneously, celebrities offered to become ambassadors for the cause, and government officials pledged to review existing legislation. After the formal presentation, while the guests circulated around the room, enjoying the cocktail and animatedly discussing the possibilities of collaboration, Breno and Luisa found a moment of privacy on one of the balconies overlooking Copacabana Beach. "I think it was a success," Breno commented, discreetly loosening his tie. "I just got confirmation that we've already surpassed our initial fundraising goal, and we haven't even had dinner yet." Luisa smiled, noticing the gleam in her brother's eyes, so different from the calculating, empty man she had met 6 months. "Hego, it's not about the money, bae. It's about the impact we can have. Think of how many families we can help stay together." Breno nodded, his gaze wandering to the horizon where the night sky met the ocean. "You know what's funny? I spent years building skyscrapers, buying islands, accumulating cars and planes, all to fill a void that nothing material could satisfy." "And now?" asked Luisa softly. "Now I understand what Mom always said," he replied. The memory of his birth mother coming back to him with a clarity he hadn't felt in decades. "True wealth is in the people we love." Luisa rested her head on her brother's shoulder, a gesture that had become natural in recent months. "She would be proud of us. Dad too." "You think so?" Breno asked, a childish vulnerability showing in his voice. "I'm sure," Luisa said. "They always said we should take care of each other no matter what. It took longer than we expected, but we're keeping our promise." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sound of waves crashing on the shore and the music flowing from the ballroom. It was a moment of peace that contrasted sharply with the turmoil they had both faced throughout their lives. Breno struggling to prove himself worthy of the Allens' fortune while stifling his origins. Luisa channeling her own pain to help others overcome their traumas. "You know what I still can't believe," Breno commented after a few minutes, "that you actually signed up for an auction to be my wife. That's the stuff of comedy, you know?" Luisa laughed, giving her brother a light shove on the shoulder. "Don't remind me. I have nightmares thinking about what could have happened if you had chosen me before we found out the truth." "Impossible," Breno declared with mock arrogance. "My subconscious clearly recognized you. Why do you think I was so disturbed after our first interview? Something about you attracted me, but not romantically. It was the call of the blood." "The call of blood," Luisa repeated, arching an eyebrow. "I think you've been reading too many Gothic novels, bae." They both laughed, enjoying the lightness that now permeated their relationship after months of joint therapy and long conversations that went into the early hours of the morning, reconstructing shared memories and creating new ones. But Louisa, Breno called, suddenly serious. There's something I've been thinking about. She stared at him curiously. I want to officially change the name of the company, from Allens Group to Ribeiro Allens Group. He paused, gauging her reaction. It's the least I can do to honor our biological parents, to show that I haven't forgotten where I came from, who I really am. Louisa's eyes filled with tears. That would mean a lot to me, Bay, and I'm sure it would to them too, wherever they are. Then it's decided, Breno smiled, raising his champagne, glass in a toast, to the future Ribeiro Allens Group and to the family we have finally rebuilt. To the family, Louisa replied, clinking her glass to his, and to all those we will help to remain united. Back in the hall, the brothers were enthusiastically received by guests eager for details about the Foundation's next steps. Amidst handshakes and promises of collaboration, Breno noticed a familiar figure watching them from afar. Patricia, his stepmother, who had not been invited, but had apparently managed to get an invitation through someone she knew. For a moment, she felt the old bitterness resurface, knowing the role she and her late adoptive father had played in keeping the brothers apart. But then, feeling Louisa's calm presence at her side, she decided it was time to end all cycles of resentment. With a discreet nod, he invited Patricia to come closer. The woman, now in her 60s, but still maintaining the austere elegance that had always characterized her, walked hesitantly toward them. Breno, she greeted formally. I confess I was surprised by the invitation. Actually, I didn't invite you, he replied honestly, but without hostility. But I'm glad you came. I'd like to officially introduce you to my sister, Louisa. Patricia looked at Louisa with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Your resemblance to Mariana is remarkable, she commented, referring to the brothers' biological mother. The same eyes. Did you know our mother? Asked Louisa, surprised. A flash of guilt crossed Patricia's face. Yes, briefly. I was present when Antonio decided to adopt only Breno. I tried to argue against the separation, but he was adamant. A difficult man to contradict. The revelation took Breno by surprise. All his life he had assumed that Patricia fully shared his adoptive father's elitist views. You never told me that. There were a lot of things we couldn't say in that house, Breno, she replied with a sad smile. But I'm genuinely happy that you've reunited, and I'm impressed with the work you're doing. Before the conversation could continue, Renata approached to inform that dinner would be served in a few minutes and that Breno and Louisa should take their places at the main table. It was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Allens, Louise said politely. I hope we can talk more another time. As they walked to the head table, Breno discreetly squeezed his sister's hand. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For teaching me to forgive, to see beyond anger and resentment. He smiled, that genuine smile that only Louisa knew completely. You were always the best part of me, Lulu, even when we were apart. That night, as Rio's elite celebrated the launch of the Ribeiro Allens Foundation, with music, dancing, and generous pledges of support, the brothers shared something deeper than the success of the event, the certainty that, after decades of separation and searching, they had finally found home in each other. And on the walls of the hall, a projection showed photographs of children reunited with their siblings thanks to the Foundation's early efforts. Faces lit up with the joy of reunion, with the promise fulfilled that no matter what happened, they would always be together. Comment here. Which part moved you the most? I read all the comments. Every day I'm here with stories that are just ours. Activate the bell so you don't miss the next one, coming back to the story. Tomorrow there will be more stories on the channel, a new story of strength and truth. I hope to see you here.